Daniel Burton was 47 years old, and until 3 months ago, he thought he had the kind of marriage people write anniversary cards about. 25 years with the same woman, a mortgage paid off early, 2 kids in good colleges. The kind of life where you stop questioning whether you made the right choices, because everything just works. Then he came home early from a business trip to find his wife Casey in their kitchen, wearing a dress he'd never seen before, having coffee with a man who looked like he'd walked off a fitness magazine cover. She didn't even flinch when Daniel walked in. That's what he remembered most, the absolute calm in her eyes, like she'd been expecting this moment and had already made peace with whatever came next. "Daniel," she said, setting down her coffee cup with deliberate precision, "we need to talk." The man stood up, extending his hand like they were at a networking event. "I'm Vince. I think it's better if I give you two some privacy." Daniel watched him leave through the front door, their front door, the one he'd repainted last summer, and turned back to his wife. Casey was 45, still beautiful in ways that made him grateful every morning he woke up next to her. Or at least, that's what he used to think. "I want a divorce," she said. No preamble, no tears, just 5 words that detonated his entire existence. He sat down because his legs suddenly felt unreliable. "What?" "I've been seeing Vince for 6 months. He's 32. He makes me feel alive again, Daniel. He makes me feel like I'm not just someone's mother or someone's wife. I'm just me." Daniel stared at her, trying to process words that seemed to be coming from a stranger wearing his wife's face. 25 years, Casey. We have 25 years together." "Exactly," she said, and there was something almost pitiful in the way she looked at him. 25 years of the same routine, the same conversations, the same predictable life. "I'm 45 years old, Daniel. I'm not dead yet. I deserve to feel young again." With a 32-year-old personal trainer? He's not just a trainer. He's a fitness entrepreneur. He's opening his own gym chain. Daniel would have laughed if his chest didn't feel like it was caving in. "How long have you been planning this?" "Does it matter?" Casey stood up, smoothing her dress. "I've already talked to an attorney. I want the house. I think that's fair, considering I'm the one who made it a home all these years while you were traveling for work." The house. Their 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina, worth about $450,000, according to the last assessment, paid off 5 years ago after Daniel had taken on extra consulting projects to accelerate the mortgage payments. "You want the house," Daniel repeated slowly, "and half of your retirement accounts. Half of everything, really. That's how divorce works in North Carolina." She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was discussing a grocery list. Daniel's retirement portfolio was worth roughly $680,000, the result of 23 years of diligent saving and careful investing. He'd been an IT systems architect for a healthcare company, pulling in about $120,000 a year. Not wealthy, but comfortable, secure. "I also think," Casey continued, "that you should cover the kids' college expenses. All of it. They shouldn't suffer because of our choices." Their daughter Emily was a junior at UNC Chapel Hill. Their son Jason was a freshman at NC State. Between them, the remaining tuition and expenses would run close to $140,000. Daniel looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "When did you become this person?" "I've always been this person. You just never paid attention." She picked up her purse from the counter. "I'm staying at Vince's apartment tonight. We can discuss the details through our attorneys." She left him sitting at their kitchen table, in their paid-off house, surrounded by 25 years of memories that apparently meant nothing at all. If you enjoy stories of sweet revenge, shocking betrayals, and justice served ice cold, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last one. And tell me where you are watching from. The first 72 hours after Casey left were a blur. Daniel moved to his house like a ghost, seeing evidence of his wife everywhere. The throw pillows she'd insisted on buying, the paint colors she'd chosen, the family photos that now felt like artifacts from an archaeological dig of his previous life. His daughter Emily called on day 3. "Dad, Mom told me, are you okay?" He wanted to say yes. He wanted to be the strong, stable parent who had all the answers. Instead, he said, "I honestly don't know. She said you two had grown apart, that this was mutual." "It wasn't mutual, Em. I came home and found out my marriage was over. There's nothing mutual about that." There was a long pause. "She's really with a guy who's only 13 years older than me. That's weird, right?" "That's one word for it. Jason and I talked. We're on your side, Dad, just so you know." Daniel felt something crack in his chest. "You don't have to take sides, she's still your mother. A mother who's acting like she's having a midlife crisis sponsored by a protein shake company. We can love her and still think she's making terrible choices." After they hung up, Daniel sat in his home office and tried to think clearly. Casey wanted the house. She wanted half of everything. She wanted him to pay for their kids' education while she played house with a man young enough to be carded at bars. He could fight her. He could drag this through court, spend tens of thousands on attorneys, and maybe keep more of what he'd worked for. Or he could roll over, except that 25 years of marriage entitled her to destroy him financially, and start over at 47 with nothing. Neither option felt like winning. That's when Daniel remembered something his father had told him years ago, back when Daniel had been debating whether to take a promotion that required relocating. "Son," his father had said, "when someone shows you who they really are, believe them, and then decide if that's someone you want in your life." Casey had shown him exactly who she was. A woman who valued feeling young over honoring commitments. A woman who could look at 25 years of partnership and see only stagnation. A woman who thought a 32-year-old's abs were worth more than a 47-year-old's loyalty. Daniel opened his laptop and started doing research. He looked up North Carolina divorce law. He read about equitable distribution, which wasn't the same as equal distribution. He learned about marital assets versus separate property. He discovered that adultery, while it didn't affect property division much anymore, could impact alimony decisions. Then he started looking into Vince. It wasn't hard. The guy had social media accounts plastered everywhere. Vince Chen, according to his Instagram bio, was a fitness entrepreneur, lifestyle coach, coming soon, Apex Performance Gyms. Daniel scrolled through photos of Vince doing pull-ups, Vince drinking green smoothies, Vince posing shirtless with motivational quotes overlaid. One post from 4 months ago showed Vince standing in front of a commercial property with the caption, "Big things coming. Investors believed in the vision. Hashtag future of fitness. Hashtag entrepreneur life. Investors." Daniel clicked through to the comments and found several people congratulating Vince on securing funding. One commenter asked how much he'd raised. Vince had replied with a flexing emoji and, "Enough to make dreams reality." Daniel sat back in his chair. Casey said Vince was opening his own gym chain. That required serious capital. Equipment, leases, staff, marketing, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars at minimum. Where did a 32-year-old personal trainer get that kind of money? He kept digging. Vince's Facebook was less curated, more personal. There were posts about struggling to make rent 3 years ago. Posts about finally paying off his student loans last year, $47,000 worth. Posts about saving up for a used BMW. Then, about 8 months ago, the tone changed. Suddenly, Vince was posting about investment opportunities, about taking calculated risks, about leveling up his life. He'd bought the BMW, a 2019 340i, based on the photos. He'd moved from a studio apartment to a 2-bedroom in a trendy part of Charlotte. And he'd started posting photos with Casey. They were subtle at first. Group shots from a charity 5K where Casey appeared in the background. A client success story post where Casey was identified only as S. A photo at a restaurant where Casey's hand was visible across the table. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. The timeline was wrong. Casey said she'd been seeing Vince for 6 months, but these photos suggested they'd known each other for at least 8 months, maybe longer. He went back to Casey's credit card statements. They had a joint account that he could still access. There, buried in the transactions, was a payment to MC Personal Training Services from 13 months ago. $1,200 for a 3-month package. His wife had lied about the timeline. Why? Daniel kept searching through the financial records. Casey had always handled the household accounts, while Daniel focused on their long-term investments. He trusted her. That trust was looking more foolish by the minute. 3 months ago, Casey had transferred $15,000 from their joint savings to her personal checking account. When Daniel had noticed and asked about it, she'd said it was for home renovations she was planning. He thought nothing of it. 2 months ago, another $10,000 transfer. Daniel's hands were shaking as he pulled up their savings account. Over the past 6 months, Casey had moved $43,000 out of their joint accounts and into her personal accounts. Money that should have been theirs was now solely hers. He thought about Vince's sudden lifestyle upgrade, the new car, the better apartment, the investor funding for his gym. "Oh, Casey," Daniel said to the empty office, "what did you do?" His phone rang. It was his attorney, or rather, the attorney he'd consulted with yesterday, a woman named Patricia Vance, who came highly recommended. Daniel had given her the basics. Wife wants divorce. Wife has been cheating. Wife wants the house in half of everything. "Daniel," Patricia said when he answered, "I've been thinking about your case. Before we proceed with any filings, I need you to gather every financial document you can find. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment accounts, everything. I'm actually looking at some of that right now. And Patricia, I think my wife has been moving money out of our joint accounts." There was a pause. "How much money?" $43,000 over the past 6 months. That's dissipation of marital assets. If she's been hiding money or spending it on her affair, that changes things significantly. I need you to document everything, every transaction, every transfer, every unusual expense. Can you do that? Yes. Good, because if your wife thinks she can drain your accounts to fund her boyfriend's business and then demand half of what's left, she's got another thing coming. After Daniel hung up, he sat in the quiet of his office and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in 3 days. Hope. Casey had shown him who she really was, but she'd also underestimated who he was. She'd thought he would be the same predictable Daniel, the one who went along with whatever she wanted, the one who avoided conflict and kept the peace. She'd forgotten that the same meticulous attention to detail that made him good at his job also made him very, very good at finding patterns in data. And right now, Casey's financial data was telling a story she probably didn't want anyone to read. Daniel opened a new spreadsheet and started documenting everything. Every transaction, every transfer, every piece of evidence that his wife of 25 years had been planning this divorce long before she'd bothered to tell him about it. He had no idea what was coming, but he knew something they didn't. Casey and Vince thought they'd won before the game even started. They had no idea that Daniel was just beginning to play. The next morning, Daniel called in sick to work. It was the first time he'd used a sick day in 3 years. He spent the entire day at his kitchen table with bank statements, credit card bills, and investment documents spread out like a paper crime scene. The picture that emerged was damning. Casey had been methodical. The $43,000 she'd moved out of their joint accounts was just the beginning. She'd also been using their joint credit card for expenses that had nothing to do with their household. Daniel found charges at high-end restaurants he'd never been to. Hotel stays in Charlotte on nights when Casey had told him she was at her book club. Purchases from men's clothing stores. Expensive ones. One charge caught his eye. $3,800 to a jeweler in uptown Charlotte, dated 2 months ago. Daniel had never received a gift from that jeweler. He'd never even heard of it. He called the store. "Yes, I'm trying to track down a purchase made on this date," he said, giving them the transaction number. "Can you tell me what was bought?" The sales associate put him on hold, then came back. "That was a Rolex Submariner, sir. A beautiful piece. Is there a problem with it?" "No problem, just confirming. Thank you." Casey had bought her boyfriend a $3,800 watch with their joint credit card, with money that Daniel had helped earn, saved, and managed responsibly for 25 years. He kept digging. The pattern became clearer. 6 months ago, right around when Casey claimed the affair started, there had been a cash withdrawal of $8,000 from their savings. When Daniel had asked about it, Casey had said it was for a girls' trip to Miami that her sister was planning. Daniel called Casey's sister, Rebecca. "Hey, Rebecca, it's Daniel. Quick question. That Miami trip you and Casey took back in May, how was it?" Rebecca sounded confused. "Miami trip? Daniel, I haven't been to Miami in 5 years. And Casey and I haven't taken a trip together since Mom's 70th birthday party." "Right, sorry, I must be thinking of something else." After he hung up, Daniel added that to his growing list. $8,000 cash withdrawal, purpose unknown, justified with a lie. He thought about Vince's Instagram posts around that same time. The ones about investor funding and believing in the vision. Daniel did some quick math. The transfers Casey had made, $43,000. The cash withdrawal, $8,000. The Rolex, $3,800. Various restaurant and hotel charges, roughly $6,000. That was $60,800 in marital funds that Casey had either hidden or spent on her affair. In North Carolina, that was called dissipation of marital assets, and judges didn't look kindly on it. But Daniel wasn't done yet. He wanted to understand exactly how deep this went. He created a fake Instagram account and started following Vince's business page for Apex Performance Gyms. Vince had posted about his investor meeting 6 months ago, right when Casey had started moving money. He'd posted about securing the location 4 months ago, right after Casey had transferred another $15,000. He'd posted about finalizing equipment orders 2 months ago, right when Casey had bought him the Rolex. The timeline was perfect, too perfect. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Casey. "Have you talked to an attorney yet? We should get this process started. The sooner we settle, the easier it will be on everyone." He stared at the message. She wanted to settle quickly. Of course she did. The faster they divorced, the less time he had to discover what she'd been doing with their money. He texted back, "Yes, I have an attorney. She's preparing paperwork." Casey's reply came immediately. "Good. I think if we're both reasonable, we can avoid a messy court battle. I'm willing to be flexible on some things, if you are." Flexible. Daniel almost laughed. She'd stolen over $60,000 in marital assets, bought her boyfriend a luxury watch, and funded his business with their savings, and she wanted him to be flexible. He texted, "I'm sure we can work something out." What Casey didn't know was that Patricia Vance wasn't just preparing divorce paperwork. She was preparing a forensic financial analysis that would document every dollar Casey had moved, hidden, or spent. She was preparing interrogatories that would require Casey to disclose every bank account, every asset, every source of income. She was preparing for war. Daniel looked around his kitchen, the kitchen where Casey had calmly told him she wanted a divorce, where she'd stood in her new dress and announced she deserved to feel young again. He'd been in shock that day, hurt, devastated. Now he was something else entirely. Now he was focused. Casey wanted to feel young again? Fine. Let her feel young. Let her enjoy her 32-year-old boyfriend and his abs and his motivational Instagram posts. But she was going to pay back every penny she'd taken, and she was going to learn that 25 years of marriage meant something, even if she'd forgotten. Daniel opened his laptop and emailed Patricia everything he'd found. All the documentation, all the evidence, all the receipts, literally. Then he sat back and waited. Casey thought this divorce was going to be simple. She thought Daniel would roll over and accept whatever terms she dictated, because that's what he'd always done. She thought she'd get the house, half the retirement accounts, and a fresh start with her boy toy, all funded by the husband she'd betrayed. What happened next was going to shock everyone, but especially Casey. Patricia Vance's office was in a sleek building in downtown Charlotte, the kind of place where everyone wore suits that cost more than Daniel's monthly car payment. He'd never felt comfortable in spaces like this, but when Patricia had called him in for an emergency meeting 3 days after he'd sent her the financial documents, he'd shown up without hesitation. "Daniel," Patricia said, gesturing to the chair across from her mahogany desk, "we need to talk about what you found." She was in her early 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. Daniel had chosen her specifically because other attorneys spoke about her with a mixture of respect and fear. "Is it enough?" Daniel asked. Patricia opened a folder thick with printouts. "Enough? Daniel, your wife has been systematically draining marital assets for over a year. This isn't just dissipation, this is potential fraud. Look at this." She spread out a timeline she'd created, with every transaction highlighted and categorized. The transfers to her personal account total $43,000. The cash withdrawals totaled $12,000. I found 4 more you'd missed. The credit card charges for expenses clearly related to her affair total $9,200. That's $64,200 in marital funds that she's either hidden or spent on her boyfriend. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "Can we get it back?" "Better than that. In North Carolina, when one spouse dissipates marital assets, the court can award the other spouse a disproportionate share of the remaining assets to compensate. Your wife took $64,200? The judge can award you that amount plus your equitable share of what's left. So she doesn't just lose what she took, she loses more?" "Exactly. But there's something else." Patricia pulled out another document. "I did some checking on Vince Chen. He filed articles of incorporation for Apex Performance LLC 6 months ago. And according to the filing, the company received an initial capital investment of $50,000. The number hung in the air between them. "That's almost exactly what Casey took," Daniel said quietly. "Almost exactly," Patricia confirmed. "Now, I can't prove that Casey gave Vince that money without subpoenaing his financial records, which we can do during discovery. But the timing is extremely suspicious. And if we can prove that she used marital funds to invest in her boyfriend's business, that investment is considered a marital asset." Daniel blinked. "Meaning what?" "Meaning you'd be entitled to half of whatever stake she has in his company. If she gave him $50,000 for, say, a 25% ownership interest, you'd be entitled to half of that, 12.5% of his business." For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt something like satisfaction. "She tried to steal our money to fund her boyfriend's gym, and instead she might have bought me a piece of it?" "Possibly, but here's where it gets interesting." Patricia pulled out yet another document, Vince's Instagram posts, printed and annotated. "Your wife's boyfriend has been posting about his investor for months. Singular. Not investors, plural. One investor who believed in the vision. And all of these posts started right after your wife made her first major transfer. So we can prove it was her. With the right discovery requests, yes, but there's more." Patricia's smile was sharp. "I pulled property records. Vince signed a 5-year commercial lease for his gym location 4 months ago. The lease required a security deposit of $15,000 and first and last month's rent totaling another $8,000. That's $23,000 up front." Daniel remembered the dates. 4 months ago, Casey had transferred exactly $15,000 from their savings. "She funded his lease deposit," he said, She funded his entire business launch, the initial capital investment, the lease deposit, the equipment purchases. I went through the credit card statements you provided, and there are multiple charges to commercial fitness equipment suppliers. Over $12,000 worth. Daniel did the math in his head. Casey hadn't just taken $64,000 in marital funds. She'd taken it and invested it directly into Vince's business, probably in exchange for an ownership stake that she'd planned to hide during the divorce. "What do we do?" he asked. Patricia leaned back in her chair. We file. We file for divorce, and we include a motion for temporary restraining order, preventing her from dissipating any more assets. We request full financial discovery, every bank account, every investment, every credit card statement, and we depose both your wife and Mr. Chen under oath. How long will this take? Months. Maybe a year if she fights hard. But Daniel, with this evidence, she won't fight hard. Because if this goes to court, she's going to lose spectacularly. The judge will see exactly what she did, and judges hate this kind of thing. They really hate it. Daniel thought about Casey's text, the one about being flexible and avoiding a messy court battle. She knows, he said suddenly. She knows that if we dig deep enough, we'll find everything. That's why she wants to settle quickly. Probably, which means our leverage just went through the roof. We can offer her a settlement that protects you and penalizes her, and she'll likely take it to avoid the public embarrassment and the court's wrath. What kind of settlement? Patricia pulled out a notepad and started writing. You keep the house. You keep 75% of the retirement accounts to compensate for what she took. She gets no alimony because of the adultery and dissipation. You split any ownership she has in Vince's business, but she has to disclose it first. And she contributes $50,000 toward the kids' remaining college expenses. Daniel stared at the list. 2 weeks ago, he'd been prepared to lose everything. Now he was looking at terms that would actually leave him in a better position than when he'd started. Will she agree to that? He asked. If she's smart, yes, because the alternative is going to trial, where I will eviscerate her on the stand and make sure the judge sees every receipt, every lie, every dollar she stole. By the time I'm done, she'll be lucky to walk away with 25% of anything. Do it, Daniel said. File everything. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Daniel should do next. The papers were served to Casey 4 days later. Daniel wasn't there to see her reaction, but he imagined it wasn't the calm, controlled response she'd given him in their kitchen. Patricia had attached every piece of evidence to the filing, every bank statement, every credit card charge, every transfer. Casey called him that evening. She didn't sound calm anymore. What the hell is this, Daniel? Your attorney is accusing me of fraud? Your attorney is documenting dissipation of marital assets, Daniel said evenly. There's a difference. This is insane. You're making me look like a criminal. You moved $64,000 out of our joint accounts and spent it on your boyfriend. What would you call that? I used our money for expenses. That's not illegal. Buying Vince a Rolex is an expense. Funding his business is an expense. Lying about a trip to Miami to justify an $8,000 cash withdrawal is an expense. Silence on the other end of the line. Casey, I know everything. I know you invested in Apex Performance. I know you paid his lease deposit. I know you bought him gym equipment with our credit card. Patricia has it all documented. You're twisting everything. Am I? Because we can go to court and let a judge decide. We can put you on the stand under oath and ask you where all that money went. We can subpoena Vince's financial records and see exactly how much you gave him. Is that what you want? More silence. Or, Daniel continued, you can look at the settlement terms Patricia sent over and realize that they're a lot more generous than what you'd get if we go to trial. You want 75% of the retirement accounts. That's not fair. You took $64,200 in marital funds. I'm asking for $170,000 more from the retirement accounts to compensate. That's actually less than half of what you took when you factor in the house equity and other assets. The math is pretty simple, Casey. I'm not giving up my share of your business investment in Vince. Daniel almost laughed. Your business investment? Casey, you made that investment with marital funds. That makes it a marital asset. I'm entitled to half. Actually, given what you did, I could argue I'm entitled to all of it, but I'm being reasonable. Vince is going to be furious. I imagine he will be, especially when he finds out that the money his investor girlfriend gave him wasn't actually hers to give. Does he know you're married, by the way? Did you tell him where the $50,000 came from? The silence told Daniel everything he needed to know. You didn't tell him, Daniel said. He thinks you're some successful businesswoman with money to invest. He has no idea you stole it from your husband. I didn't steal anything. Then explain it to a judge. Explain why you transferred $43,000 to your personal account over 6 months. Explain the cash withdrawals. Explain the Rolex. Explain all of it under oath, where lying is a crime. He could hear Casey breathing on the other end of the line, could practically feel her weighing her options. I need to talk to my attorney, she said finally. You do that. You have 10 days to respond to the settlement offer. After that, we go to discovery, and I promise you, Casey, you don't want that. Discovery means depositions. It means Vince gets deposed. It means all of this becomes part of the public record. Everyone will know what you did. Your friends, your family, your coworkers. Everyone. You wouldn't. Try me. You wanted a divorce because you needed to feel young again? Fine. But you're not going to destroy me financially to fund your midlife crisis. Those days are over. He hung up before she could respond. His hands were shaking, not from anger anymore, but from adrenaline. He'd never spoken to Casey like that, never stood up to her, never called her out, never set boundaries that had teeth. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. Daniel went to work, came home, documented more evidence at Patricia's request, and waited. Emily called twice to check on him. Jason sent supportive texts with memes about staying strong. Then, on day 8, Patricia called. Her attorney wants to meet, she said. What does that mean? It means she's scared. It means they've looked at the evidence and realized they can't win. They want to negotiate. Based on our terms? Based on our terms, with some minor modifications. They want 40% of the retirement accounts instead of 25%. They want the settlement to be confidential. And they want you to waive any claim to Vince's business. Daniel thought about it. 40% of $680,000 was $272,000. That meant he'd keep $408,000. After Casey had tried to take half, $340,000, plus whatever she'd already stolen, he'd still come out ahead. What do you think? He asked. I think it's reasonable. The confidentiality clause works in your favor too. It keeps your family matters private. And honestly, a share of Vince's gym is probably worth less than the paper it's printed on. Most new businesses fail within 5 years. So we'd be giving up something worthless in exchange for a better split of what actually matters? Exactly. What about the house? They agreed, you keep it. And they've agreed to contribute $50,000 toward college expenses over the next 3 years. $25,000 now and $12,500 per year for the next 2 years. Daniel did the math. He'd keep the house, worth $450,000, with no mortgage. He'd keep $408,000 in retirement accounts. He'd get $50,000 in cash for college expenses. That was nearly $910,000 in total assets. Casey would get $272,000 and whatever Vince's gym was worth, assuming it ever turned a profit. She's getting less than a third of our total assets, Daniel said slowly. That's what happens when you dissipate $64,000 in marital funds. The court compensates the wronged spouse. We're just doing it through settlement instead of trial. Do it. Accept the terms. You're sure? Daniel thought about Casey in his kitchen, calm and certain as she destroyed their marriage. He thought about her texts asking him to be flexible. He thought about her spending their money on a man 13 years older than their daughter. I'm sure. I'll draw up the papers. Daniel, you should be proud of yourself. A lot of people in your situation would have rolled over and accepted whatever terms their spouse demanded. You fought back, and you won. After they hung up, Daniel walked through his house now, legally and completely. He thought about what came next. Casey would move out. The divorce would be finalized. Life would continue. But he wasn't done yet. There was still one more move to make, one more card to play. Because Daniel had realized something important over the past few weeks. He wasn't the same person he'd been when Casey left him. He'd learned to stand up for himself. He'd learned to fight for what was fair. And he'd learned that sometimes the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was letting people face the consequences of their own actions. Casey had consequences coming. She just didn't know it yet. The settlement was finalized 3 weeks later in a conference room at Patricia's office. Casey arrived with her attorney, a nervous-looking man named Robert Klein, who kept checking his phone like he'd rather be anywhere else. Daniel watched Casey walk in. She looked different, thinner, with shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She wouldn't meet his gaze. "Let's keep this professional and brief," Robert said. "My client has agreed to the terms as outlined. We just need signatures." Patricia distributed the documents. Daniel read through them carefully, even though he'd seen them multiple times already. Everything was there: the house, the retirement account split, the college contribution, the confidentiality clause. He signed. Casey signed. It was over. "My client will vacate the marital residence within 30 days, Robert said. "She requests that you not be present during the move." "That's fine," Daniel said. He looked at Casey. "Where are you going?" She glanced up, surprised he'd spoken directly to her. "That's not really your concern anymore. Just curious if Vince's apartment has room for all your things." Her expression hardened. "Actually, I'm getting my own place, a condo downtown." "Funded by your share of the settlement?" "Funded by my money, yes." Daniel nodded slowly. He wanted to say something cutting, something that would hurt her the way she'd hurt him. But looking at her across the table, he realized he didn't need to. She'd already lost. She'd traded 25 years of marriage, a paid-off house, financial security, and her children's respect for a 32-year-old with abs and a gym that probably wouldn't survive its first year. She'd gambled everything on feeling young again, and she'd lost. "I hope it's worth it," Daniel said quietly. Casey's eyes met his for the first time. "What?" "The condo, the freedom, Vince, all of it. I hope it's worth what you gave up." She looked away. "We're done here." They gathered their things and left. Casey and her attorney through one door, Daniel and Patricia through another. In the parking garage, Patricia shook his hand. "Congratulations, Daniel. Not many people walk away from a divorce this well positioned. Thank you for everything. Stay in touch. And Daniel, don't let what she did make you cynical. Not everyone is like that." He drove home, to his house, and sat in the driveway for a long moment before going inside. Emily was waiting in the kitchen. She'd driven down from Chapel Hill to be there for him. "How did it go?" she asked. "It's done. Official. We're divorced." She hugged him, and Daniel felt something in his chest finally relax. "You okay, Dad?" Yeah, I think I am. Jason and I were talking. We want you to know that we don't blame you for any of this. And we're not going to let Mom pretend like this was some mutual, amicable split. We know what she did." Daniel pulled back to look at his daughter. She's still your mother. You can love her and disagree with her choices. We can also love you and support you completely, which is what we're doing. They ordered pizza and ate it in the living room, watching terrible reality TV and not talking about the divorce. It felt normal. It felt like the beginning of something new. Later, after Emily had gone to bed in her old room, Daniel sat in his office and thought about everything that had happened. Casey had wanted someone younger. She'd wanted to feel alive again. She'd wanted excitement and passion and all the things she apparently couldn't find in their marriage. And what had she gotten? A smaller bank account, a condo instead of a house, and a boyfriend who was about to learn that his gym's primary investor had spent money that wasn't actually hers. Daniel wasn't vindictive. He didn't wish her pain or misery. But he also didn't regret making sure that she faced consequences for her choices. That night, he slept better than he had in months. What happened next shocked everyone, especially Casey. Vince Chen's Apex Performance Gym opened on a cold Tuesday in November, 2 months after Daniel's divorce was finalized. Daniel only knew about it because Emily had sent him a screenshot of Vince's Instagram post, a photo of Vince cutting a ribbon in front of a gleaming storefront with the caption, "Dreams don't work unless you do. Grand opening, #AX Performance, #Entrepreneur Life." "Looks like Mom's investment paid off," Emily had texted with an eye roll emoji. Daniel had stared at the photo for a long time. Then he'd made a phone call. "Patricia, it's Daniel Burton. I need to ask you about something." "What's on your mind?" "The settlement agreement. When Casey waived my claim to Vince's business, did that release her from any liability regarding how she funded it?" There was a pause. "No, the settlement just said you wouldn't pursue an ownership stake. It didn't immunize her from other legal consequences. Why?" "Just curious, thanks." Daniel hung up and did something he'd been putting off for weeks. He called an old colleague, James Wu, who worked in the district attorney's office. "James, this is weird, but I need some advice. Hypothetically, if someone used joint marital funds to invest in their boyfriend's business without their spouse's knowledge or consent, and then tried to hide that investment during divorce proceedings, what kind of legal territory would that fall under?" James was quiet for a moment. "Hypothetically, that could be several things: fraud, misappropriation, possibly even embezzlement if she was using funds from joint accounts she didn't have sole authority over." "Why?" "Just trying to understand my options." "Daniel, if this isn't hypothetical, you should talk to your attorney. And maybe the police." But Daniel didn't want to involve the police. He didn't want Casey arrested or charged with crimes. He just wanted her to understand that actions had consequences. He thought about it for 3 days. Then he had a better idea. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Daniel's situation. The letter arrived at Casey's new condo on a Thursday morning. It was from the Internal Revenue Service. Daniel knew this because he carefully reviewed the tax implications of Casey's investment in Vince's business with a CPA named Helen Rodriguez, who specialized in divorce-related tax issues. "If your wife made a $50,000 investment in her boyfriend's business using marital funds," Helen had explained, "and she didn't declare that investment as income or as a gift, she's violated tax law. Even if she had ownership stake in return, she needed to file appropriate documentation. And if she gave it as a gift exceeding $15,000 in a single year, she needed to file a gift tax return." What happens if she didn't? The IRS would be very interested, especially if someone filed an anonymous tip with documentation. Daniel had thought about that for exactly 1 day before deciding that some lessons needed to be learned the hard way. He didn't know exactly what the IRS letter said, but he could imagine. Casey would need to provide documentation of the funds she transferred to Vince. She'd need to explain the nature of the investment. She'd need to prove whether it was a business investment or a gift. And either way, she'd likely owe taxes and penalties. His phone rang that afternoon. It was Casey. "Did you do this?" she demanded. No hello, no preamble. "Do what?" "The IRS is auditing me. They're asking about money I transferred to Vince's business. They know exact amounts, exact dates. This was you. Daniel kept his voice neutral. Casey, if you made financial transactions, you're responsible for reporting them accurately on your taxes. That's not me. That's the law. You reported me. I didn't report you. Someone might have filed a tip about potential tax violations, but that could be anyone. Vince's accountant, his business partner if he has one, anyone who saw the money trail and thought it looked suspicious. Bullshit. This is revenge. No, Casey. Revenge would be calling your employer and telling them you embezzled marital funds. Revenge would be posting the settlement agreement online for everyone to see. Revenge would be telling Vince's other investors, if he has any, where his original funding actually came from. This is just the IRS doing its job. I could owe thousands in back taxes and penalties. Then you should probably pay them. And in the future, maybe consult a tax professional before moving large sums of money around. I can't believe you. After everything. After everything? Daniel's voice finally rose. Casey, you spent 25 years with me, took $64,000 of our money to fund your boyfriend's business, and then asked me to be flexible during the divorce. You're getting exactly what you earned. The IRS audit, the smaller settlement, all of it. You made choices, and now you get to live with them. You're destroying my life. Your life isn't destroyed. You have $272,000 in the bank. You have a condo. You have your boyfriend and his gym. You have everything you said you wanted. You just don't have it tax-free, and you don't have it without consequences. There's a difference. She hung up on him. Daniel set down his phone and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt. Just a quiet sense that justice, imperfect as it was, had been served. The real consequences came 3 weeks later. Daniel was having dinner with Emily and Jason at a restaurant near the university when Jason suddenly said, "Holy shit, Dad, look at this." He held up his phone. On the screen was a news article from a local Charlotte business journal. New fitness venture closes after 2 months. Apex Performance Gym files for bankruptcy. Daniel took the phone and read the article. Vince Chen's gym had opened with great fanfare, but failed to attract enough members to cover its costs. The article mentioned high overhead, expensive equipment leases, and insufficient capital reserves. Apex Performance LLC had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, liquidating all assets. Mom invested like $50,000 in that place, Emily said quietly. And it's gone, Jason added. All of it. Daniel handed back the phone. He thought about Casey, about the tax audit she was facing, about the settlement money she'd counted on. If she'd owed taxes and penalties on the Vince investment, and now that investment was worthless, she was in serious financial trouble. Do you feel bad? Emily asked. Daniel considered the question honestly. I feel bad that she made choices that hurt her. I don't feel bad that I refused to let her hurt me in the process. That's fair, Jason said. She brought this on herself. They finished dinner and drove back to the house. On the way, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Vince. We need to talk. Daniel stared at the message. Then he typed back, I don't think we have anything to discuss. Casey told me everything. About the money, about the settlement, about you reporting her to the IRS. Then you know it was her money to lose, not mine. She's devastated. The audit, my business failing. She's broke, Daniel. That's unfortunate, but it's also not my problem. She made her choices. You're a cold bastard. No, I'm someone who refused to be destroyed by my wife's affair and her financial crimes. There's a difference. Good luck with whatever comes next for you. Daniel blocked the number. That night, he sat in his office and thought about everything that had happened over the past 6 months. The shock of Casey's betrayal, the discovery of what she'd done with their money, the divorce proceedings, the settlement, and now the aftermath. Casey had wanted to feel young again. She'd wanted passion and excitement, and freedom from the predictable life they'd built together. And she'd gotten it. She'd gotten a younger boyfriend. She'd gotten freedom. She'd gotten excitement. She'd also gotten an IRS audit, a failed investment, and financial instability at 45 years old. Daniel hadn't planned for Vince's business to fail. He hadn't orchestrated that part, but he also couldn't deny that it felt like cosmic justice. Casey had gambled their security on a 32-year-old's dreams, and those dreams had evaporated like morning fog. He pulled up his retirement account balance on his computer, $408,000, growing steadily with the market's recent gains. His house was paid off. His kids were doing well in school, their tuition covered. His job was secure. He'd survived. More than that, he'd made sure that the person who tried to take advantage of his trust had faced real consequences. Not because he was vindictive, but because some lessons can only be learned through pain. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Daniel ran into Casey at a grocery store. She was in the produce section, examining apples with the same careful attention she'd always given to selecting fruit. She looked older, tired. The shadows under her eyes were deeper now, permanent. "Casey," he said, because ignoring her felt petty. She looked up, startled. "Daniel, hi. How are you?" It was a meaningless question, but she answered anyway. "I'm managing, living in a smaller place now. The condo was too expensive after everything. I heard about Vince's gym." "Yeah." She put down the apple she'd been examining. "That was a disaster. I lost everything I invested, and the IRS, I'm still paying off what I owe them." Daniel nodded. "I'm sorry you're going through that." "Are you, though?" He thought about it honestly. "I'm sorry that you made choices that hurt you. I'm not sorry that I protected myself from those same choices." Casey was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I was angry at you for a long time, for the settlement terms, for the IRS thing, for all of it. And now? Now I'm just angry at myself." She looked at him directly for the first time. "I threw away 25 years for a fantasy, for a man who wasn't even who I thought he was. Vince and I broke up 2 months ago. Turned out he was more interested in my money than in me." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not satisfaction, something closer to sadness. "I'm sorry. You warned me. At the settlement meeting, you asked if it was worth it." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It wasn't, in case you were wondering." "What are you going to do?" "Keep working, keep paying my debts, try to rebuild some kind of relationship with Emily and Jason, though I don't know if that's possible. They're pretty angry with me." "Give them time. They're your kids. They'll come around eventually." "Maybe." She picked up her basket. "I should go. It was good to see you, Daniel. You look happy." "I'm getting there." He watched her watch away, this woman he'd spent 25 years with, who'd become a stranger in his kitchen, and was now just someone he used to know. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel vindicated. He just felt free. That evening, Daniel had dinner with Emily and Jason at his house, their house, the one they'd grown up in. Emily had graduated from UNC and gotten a job in Charlotte. Jason was thriving at State. They gathered at the kitchen table, the same table where Casey had once announced she wanted a divorce. "Mom texted me today," Emily said. "She wants to have lunch." "Are you going to go?" Daniel asked. "I don't know. Maybe. She's still my mom, even if I'm disappointed in her choices." "That's very mature of you," Jason rolled his eyes. "She literally destroyed our family for a guy with a gym and abs. I'm not that forgiving yet." "You don't have to be," Daniel said. "But eventually, you might find that holding on to anger hurts you more than it hurts her." "Is that what you did? Let go of your anger?" Daniel thought about it. "I made sure there were consequences for what she did. I protected myself financially and legally. But once that was done, yeah, I let go of the anger. It wasn't serving any purpose except making me miserable." "You're better than I am," Jason muttered. They ate dinner and talked about other things. Emily's new job, Jason's upcoming exams, plans for Thanksgiving, normal things, family things. After they left, Daniel sat in his living room and thought about the past year, the devastation, the betrayal, the fight to protect what was his, the victory, imperfect but real. He thought about Casey in the grocery store, smaller somehow, diminished by her own choices. He thought about Vince, whose dreams had bankrupted him before he turned 33. And he thought about himself, 48 now, older but also wiser, stronger, more aware of his own worth. Casey had wanted someone younger because she'd equated youth with vitality, with possibility, with value. She'd looked at their 25 years together and seen stagnation instead of stability. She'd looked at Daniel and seen predictability instead of reliability. She'd been wrong, but she'd had to lose everything to learn that lesson. The money, the boyfriend, the fantasy of starting over. Daniel had learned a different lesson, that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a good life and refusing to let someone else's choices destroy it. He pulled out his phone and texted Patricia, "Thank you for everything." She replied quickly, "You did the hard work. I just helped you navigate the system. How are you doing?" "Better than I expected. Better than I probably deserve." "You deserve to be happy, Daniel. Don't forget that." He set down his phone and looked around his house. His home. The place he'd fought to keep, not out of spite, but because it represented something important. Stability, security, the life he'd built through decades of work and care. Casey had traded that stability for excitement, for passion, for the illusion of youth. And in the end, she'd learned what Daniel had known all along, that some things, once traded away, can never be reclaimed. That 25 years of partnership had value, even if she'd been too blind to see it. That the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's just different grass, and it still needs to be watered and maintained and cared for. Daniel had learned something too. He'd learned that he was stronger than he'd thought, that he could stand up for himself, that he deserved respect and honesty and fidelity, and that it was okay to demand those things. He'd learned that sometimes people show you who they really are, and when they do, you should believe them. And he'd learned that justice, real justice, isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just making sure that people face the natural consequences of their own decisions. Casey had wanted someone younger. She'd wanted to feel alive again. She'd wanted freedom from the life they'd built together. And Daniel's response, the thing that had left her speechless, though she'd never admit it, wasn't anger or begging or trying to win her back. It was simply refusing to be destroyed by her choices. It was protecting what was his. It was making sure that if she wanted to burn down their marriage, she'd have to face the consequences alone. That was the thing she'd never expected. That Daniel would fight back, that he would document everything, that he would make sure she couldn't steal from him without penalty, that he would show her, through actions rather than words, that 25 years of loyalty and partnership had value, and that discarding them came with a price. A year after the divorce, Daniel was sitting in his office when he received an email from Casey. "Daniel, I've been thinking a lot about what happened between us. I know I hurt you badly. I know I made terrible choices. I know I threw away something valuable for something worthless. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just writing to tell you that you were right about everything. I thought I needed excitement and youth and passion. What I actually needed was to appreciate what I had. I hope you're happy. You deserve it. You always did. Casey." Daniel read the email 3 times. Then he wrote back, "Casey, thank you for writing. I appreciate the honesty. I've spent the past year learning to build a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's validation or choices. It's been hard, but it's also been good. I'm happy. I hope someday you will be too. Take care of yourself. Daniel." He hit send and closed his laptop. That was it, the final chapter. The end of 25 years. He'd survived. He'd protected himself. He'd made sure there were consequences for betrayal. and now he was free to move forward. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's letting people face the consequences of their own actions while you build a life so good they regret what they lost. Casey had wanted someone younger. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted, and she'd lost everything that mattered in the process. Daniel had lost a marriage, but he'd kept his dignity, his security, and his self-respect. In the end, that made all the difference. Daniel's story isn't just about a failed marriage or a contentious divorce. It's a masterclass in understanding that every choice we make carries weight, and that betrayal, no matter how justified it feels in the moment, eventually demands payment. Casey's fundamental mistake wasn't falling out of love with Daniel. It wasn't even her affair with Vince. Her critical error was believing that excitement and youth were more valuable than stability and partnership. After 25 years of marriage, she looked at her life and saw monotony instead of security. She saw predictability instead of reliability. She convinced herself that a 32-year-old's abs and enthusiasm could replace 2.5 decades of shared history, mutual sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. This is a lesson many learn too late. The grass isn't greener on the other side. It's just different grass, and it requires the same care, attention, and work that any relationship demands. The thrill of something new inevitably fades, and when it does, you're left with whatever foundation you've built, or in Casey's case, with nothing at all. What transformed Casey's midlife crisis from a personal tragedy into a financial disaster was her decision to lie and steal. She didn't just leave her marriage, she systematically drained marital assets to fund her boyfriend's business venture. She moved $64,000 without Daniel's knowledge or consent. She lied about where the money went. She planned to hide her investment during divorce proceedings. The lesson here is stark. Dishonesty compounds problems. If Casey had simply asked for a divorce, honestly, she might have walked away with a fair settlement and maintained some dignity. Instead, her deception ensured she faced legal consequences, tax penalties, and ultimately lost far more than she would have in an honest separation. Every lie she told, every dollar she moved, created evidence that would later be used against her. Daniel's journey teaches us that self-respect isn't negotiable. When Casey first announced her intentions, Daniel could have accepted her terms out of shock, guilt, or a desire to avoid conflict. Many people do exactly that. They allow themselves to be steamrolled by a spouse who's already decided to blow up their life. Instead, Daniel did something remarkable. He gathered evidence, consulted professionals, and fought for what was rightfully his. He didn't do this out of revenge or spite. He did it because he recognized that allowing someone to betray and rob you without consequences isn't kindness, it's enabling. It's teaching people that loyalty has no value and that betrayal is cost-free. The lesson is that standing up for yourself isn't cruel, it's necessary. It's the difference between being a victim and being someone who refuses to be victimized. Perhaps the most profound lesson in this story is that Daniel didn't need to devise elaborate revenge schemes. He simply ensured that Casey faced the natural consequences of her own actions. The IRS audit wasn't revenge. It was the logical result of hiding financial transactions. Vince's business failure wasn't something Daniel orchestrated. It was the predictable outcome of an underfunded venture built on stolen money and unrealistic dreams. By stepping back and allowing consequences to unfold naturally, Daniel taught Casey something no amount of arguing or pleading could have. That actions have repercussions, that betrayal carries costs, and that you can't build a future on a foundation of lies and theft. The final lesson is about release. Daniel didn't spend years nursing his anger or plotting elaborate revenge. Once he'd protected himself legally and financially, he let go. He moved forward. He built a new life. He maintained relationships with his children and even found space for limited compassion toward Casey when he encountered her months later. This is perhaps the hardest and most important lesson. Holding on to anger hurts you more than it hurts the person who wronged you. Justice and boundaries are essential, but once they're established, freedom comes from moving forward rather than looking back. Casey wanted someone younger, but what she really needed was wisdom. By the time she learned that lesson, she'd already paid the price, and Daniel had already moved on. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.